My topic is uncertainty, which I think is one of the grand topics of both science and social science. It's part of everything, which I'll try to explain. One thing about uncertainty is we all have an intrinsic understanding of what that means. And I think we can use that to think about uncertainty, but I'll also use that to challenge perhaps a bit that our natural way of thinking about uncertainty may not be the most adaptive way that we do. Now, if you listen to the radio, turn on TV or social media, many stories, events are about how uncertainty is increasing everywhere. And perhaps it is. Do we have any evidence that uncertainty is increasing in the world? Well, it's hard to measure, but actually there is some simple things we can do. There's an uncertainty index based on economics and GDP factors, which since about the 1960s does seem to show average uncertainty in the world is rising. And Google has a lovely little feature called Ngrams, if you've got time to explore it, where you can look at the relative frequency of words used across all language that Google has managed to purloin, to copy. And what it shows, unlike many other words, around about 1960, the relative frequency of the word uncertainty overtook the frequency of the word certainty and has been heading in that direction ever since. So our own language has changed in the last 20 or 30 years to be much more about uncertainty. And it's going to seem either surprising, ironic, or paradoxical that we actually don't know a lot about uncertainty. So what I've been doing, and some of our projects have been looking at where is uncertainty, what does it mean, and how do we best work in an uncertain world. At the Future of Work Institute, we're often asked questions about uncertainty. When we started about 5 years ago, technology was then a big topic. How will jobs change? What will they be like? We don't know. How can we try to get a better understanding? So as we're rapidly working on that problem, of course, like everyone else, the pandemic became the big question, and very much about work. How do we work? What will work look like? How can we manage people not interacting with each other? And as the pandemic receded, and perhaps some more certainty was coming back, and I'll come back to this point of whether it was or wasn't, just at that point this year, I don't think we could get, apart from all the social and military conflict around the world, a bigger disruption than AI really hitting public consciousness this year. And immediately this year, again, everyone is talking about what does that mean for work? Now it's not manual jobs, now it's not process jobs, is it intellectual jobs that are under threat and we're uncertain about? And of course all the academics in the room should be very worried about that point. So there is this sense that the volatility of the world around us that we experience is increasing all the time, that it makes our future less predictable, and that creates a lot of anxiety. Now, the point I like to challenge in this work we do around uncertainty, that it actually doesn't mean anxiety. It doesn't really mean threat. And it's only recently that our esteemed economists have started to go back to some of the early writings of Frank Knight, an early economist in the 20s, saying, uncertainty just means you don't know. And really, not only do you not know, it's pretty damn impossible to actually know what the future is going to be. And we need to accept some of that intrinsic unknowableness about the future. And I'd like to end up saying that's a good thing, but highlight how much it can be a negative thing. If we don't know what the future holds, it's very easy to see that as a huge threat. Now, when I first started studying, one of my first studies in the US, I had the opportunity to work with a large teachers' union who, on a very small basis, did enterprise bargaining agreements. And we looked at what happened to people's attitudes and beliefs as the 3-year bargaining cycle went round. And we tried to show that, yes, people probably did come to see more cohesive, have more clearer, distinct opinions as the perception of a threat got larger. And we see that more and more now. There's lots of threats, and perhaps if we look at maybe I'll risk going into the area of populist politics, but I'm not sure how safe I'll be on that ground. But in populist politics, I think one of the things we see is people promoting the uncertainty as a threat of which we have a certain answer, and that will make people safer and better. And the outcome of that, at the moment, is a lot of polarization. Threats being highlighted and people coming together in polarized groups. And we see that at a smaller scale. Many social psychologists have studied how a threat creates in-groups and out-groups who start seeing each other as the enemy, looking at their characteristics. And it all stems initially from they're different, or we don't understand, we don't know what that is. And that uncertainty transforms into a threat, and the process follows. Our more recent work on uncertainty, and going back to the 1920s, saying, but uncertainty is actually the essential condition for learning. No research would exist, just to support academics for a while, no research would exist if we knew what the answer was. The whole point is we don't know. But it's even deeper than that. We wouldn't learn, we wouldn't explore if we didn't know things. So uncertainty is almost the most fundamental aspect of being a living organism, a living person. We don't know all about our environment. We have to engage with it and learn. And that's an ongoing process. And in our work, we've encouraged people, some really simple things, of not to come to closure too early about what the state of uncertainty is, to open up the possibilities. And the example I would use as one we're still wondering about is after the pandemic, when people were coming back to work, this period of great uncertainty, from an uncertainty exploration point of view, could have been the most inventive period in our history, or at least for a few years, could have been a very exploratory, inventive time. And I think in many ways we sadly missed that opportunity to explore what flexible work might mean, how people could act differently. And I see many organisations creating policies that are really trying to say, we know how it works, this is what you should be doing. And it feels like, to me, and from that kind of social perspective, we have felt like we've come through a threat and now we're trying to close down the options. Whereas there's maybe not exploring the huge possibilities we have at the moment to work differently. And that imperative not just coming out of uncertainty and change, but as you've highlighted, the intergenerational report, different expectations. There's lots of reasons we should be thinking about work differently, and perhaps we close down on them too much. So thinking about where, in all uncertainties, and it's not easy, when I feel uncertain about something, I generally don't like it, it feels uncomfortable, and it's easy to go to that's a threat somehow to me. But we need, at both an individual group and perhaps a policy level, say this is where the opportunities are, how are we not closing down? Just to conclude and kind of link science of uncertainty and the social science of uncertainty, I was lucky enough to chair a conference in Switzerland earlier this year on the topic of uncertainty, where various scientists, social scientists, psychologists convened to discuss what is it? What are we measuring? Should we even be trying to understand uncertainty? And certainly some people made a case that uncertainty isn't something you can study, it's just everything around us. So I tend to think there's a place only for scientists at two ends of this spectrum. One, the cosmologists and astronomers at the point of the Big Bang, because that's where uncertainty started. And we've been living with it ever since. And every part of history is an unfolding of the uncertainty there. And we just cannot predict everything that happens, whether it's micro, macro. At the other end, scientists, neuroscientists, neuroanatomists, and increasingly computer scientists are trying to understand how the brain works as an uncertainty mechanism. Really, really important, and the computer scientists are really way on top of this, realizing that if we want machines to act like humans, they better be able to manage uncertainty way better than they currently can. But between those two extremes is all the world of history, politics, psychology, economics, and it's a mixture of the interplay of science and social science that I think is really exciting, and that grand topic of uncertainty, I suspect I haven't made you any more certain about it. And there's endless scope to point the ironies of studying something you don't understand. But I hope I've just explained a little bit of why uncertainty seems such an important topic for science and social science, both practically and in theory. Thanks very much.